We are back once again with a brand new Wayfinder video, and today we're going to have a little bit of a discussion since some of you who might have been around have seen that GitHub ended up putting out his review of Wayfinder here, and in return there have been some discussion in the community as well of how much it ended up helping the game. Since you could see that being posted over on Reddit about this stuff, and today we're gonna go ahead and give that video a watch and see if there was anything that I want to throw in on the discussion, since I know there is so much in Wayfinder and there was a lot of information out there that's a little over the plate, especially once you think about the MMO, the early asset, and now with 1.0, and we will see how much the review actually did indeed help out the player base, at least over on Steam, because we do not have number when it comes to a PlayStation. But nonetheless, let's just go ahead and let's jump into this and let's see what is happening with that review.
1.0 after a year of early access, and what a roller coaster of a journey it's been through. Despite really digging the art direction, character kits, and encounter design, I unfortunately could not recommend this one at the early access launch, as it was plagued by nearly all the MMO/live service launch issues that you can imagine. Ridiculous.
Yeah, this is something that I will go ahead and throw in here, since yeah, that was one of them issue when it came to this of not only the queue, don't get me wrong, the queue was not great. But also we did have a whole bunch of issues that ended up prolonging through pretty much the whole time of early access as a live server game, since we did have issues with the whole server settings when it came to checking players and what items they have at any point. They talked about that doing some of the live streams. That was a big issue that was causing a lot of crashes and stuff, especially like once you left like Skylight and the more smaller hub and went into the open areas, and also not counting how in many ways Wayfinder would kind of, I don't want to say thrown under the bus, but also I kind of got shoved into a brand new architecture when it came to servers, which haven't really been tested up to that point, since this is something Digital Extreme wanted Airship to experiment with. And once again, that will also get us into discussion about how much the game should have had an early beta asset that wasn't under NDA, something a little more public than the few hundred people that were playing it in quote beta, to hopefully work out some of the issues. But to be totally honest, none of the issues really ever got fixed. Don't get me wrong, it got better over time, but not quite actually fixed. But nonetheless,
networking issues, overindulgent monetization, and there was also still work to be done to refine its combat.
Okay, the thing real quick I want to add though about the monetization thing. The monetization thing, honestly, is I personally never really had a problem with the monetization in Wayfinder. Because of a few things offhand. First of all, everything that was in the game other than the skins, which I will admit freely if you hang around my live stream, by the way, twitch.tv/Maconn, you would know I kind of not a big fan of skins. I don't really care about outfits. I'm more in the case of I want your outfit to be rewarding from doing content, and also I come from the old days of MMO when you will walk into a city and you see someone with an armor or a weapon and just be like, man, how did they did that? I want that weapon. Or have the other side of that of being like, oh god, I know what it took to get that. That guy is awesome, you know, that whole thing. So I'm never a big fan of skins in any live server game. Any at all, but when it comes to the monetization of the weapons and character, that doesn't never fully bother me, because the good thing about Wayfinder any in the live service is, don't get me wrong, you looking at some grinding, but at the same time everything for the most part was very doable, and in return, once you find out how you got to go about it, there was only a handful of hours that it would take to unlock a weapon or a character, which for me was anywhere from like 6 to 10 hours. Well, I know there were plenty of other live server game that is like 500 times more. So I'm looking at you, Sega, with PSO. But nonetheless, for me, it wasn't that bad. Also, the other thing to keep in mind about monetization is originally monetization did start off with the weapons being, I want to say it was 1200 silver. And within the like few weeks, they did bump that down a bit because of community feedback. But that was also a thing that could be discussed. Well, there was a small period of time when stuff was more pricier than it ended up being. So take that as you will for the monetization. But overall, I never really had that much issue with it, all things considered.
Buildcraft. As such, the game was met with middling reception at exactly the same moment that Wayfinder's publisher, Digital Extremes, completely dissolved their publishing team, leaving Airship Syndicate to fend for themselves. Layoffs at Airship soon followed. And
just for the record here, it wasn't just Airship. Since they cut and shut down all of third-party publishing. Airship was the main one that was obviously more affected because they were the one that already had a product technically out there to be bought. Well, there is plenty of other devs that was also affected outside of Airship, and a whole bunch of games that we might never see because of the shutdown, or maybe move somewhere else that we had no idea about. But just know that wasn't just a Airship thing. It was across the board for multiple partners for digital streams.
Wayfinder was later delisted from all storefronts while the studio spent some time to reassess. At that point, I thought it was all over for Wayfinder.
I did too. To be honest, when it got delisted, I really thought that was also the end of it. Which was extremely sad, because out of most MMOs I have played over the decade, as a channel that, for the most part, do MMO content at that point, Wayfinder was easily probably top 3 favorite MMO for me at the time, and I still will say any now, looking back on it, anyway, all the issues. But yeah, it's a miracle that game and he got out of being delisted and brought back.
Sure, it'd be sent to live on a farm with all the other live service casualties. But Airship Syndicate refused to fold. Despite dire straits, the studio downsized, directors took pay cuts, and even put their own money down to push this over the line. And with their backs against the wall, have spent the last year completely overhauling this game, such that it's now nearly unrecognizable from its early access launch. Wayfinder has undergone a remarkable transformation, shedding all the live service elements that initially plagued it. What was once a flawed MMO light, lacking any of the essential MMO features, has evolved.
To be honest, I said it back in the day, and I will say it again here, that the whole MMO logic is, instead of thinking of this as like WoW or Final Fantasy 14, this is more in line with Phantasy Star Online, and by proxy PSO2 as well. Which is the main reason I was so into it and so much trying to promote it to the PSO community, because this is, for the most part, just PSO on Dreamcast/GameCube, but done, well, present day, but a lot of the same traffic, still very much online with what you would have had back in the 90s and early 2000s with Phantasy Star.
Evolved into a genuinely competent action RPG with optional 3-player co-op. I've spent a collective 90 plus hours in this game now across the preview build, the betas, the early access, and this 1.0 launch. I've been through all the highs and lows, started
almost
fresh
600
multiple times,
on my
and
end.
even still, I'm keen to jump in for another dungeon run or boss fight by virtue of these changes. Overall, Airship Syndicate have landed on something here that'll likely struggle to find huge success given the reception to its rocky launch.
Yeah, also the other thing about that I think will also be a little difficult here, as far as getting like a lot of people into it. Not only is, once again, the whole MMO stuff did very much hurt this, since, as we all know, you only have really one launch to go off of, and any MMO games nowadays launch in horrible states. Sadly, not only how long it took, especially going up to the delisting, not counting the whole feeling that a large part of the community have for paying for MMO and then not getting it. We also have the issue that they went into about refunding and how they couldn't because of how Digital Extreme handled the finance. And like any now, this game have found a little bit of a footing, but it will probably more than likely be a game that will forever be where it is right now, which overall and not horrible. We do have, at least on Steam, over 1,000 people playing it, but at far of like actually trying to promote this or to get it to like a larger audience, that probably not really going to happen, because the great hurrah will be when it comes to Xbox. We should be hopefully getting an announcement on that any day now, since we are getting closer to the end of the year for that. But yeah, like, so much of the game is shot in its foot, and outside of a few little diehard that will obviously never fully get to the point that the game probably should have been, especially with how much the game do have gameplay, like I said, such as like Fantasy Star, with a little bit of like Monster Hunter toward in here, a little bit of Diablo. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, I don't foresee the game growing to any giant amount. And in return, probably never would have any if it did stay in a live server, any if it did that digital stream. But the other issue of this game, which I know a lot of this does have to do with digital stream originally with the pre-release. Very much felt like this game wasn't really promoted in a way that would hit certain demographic that obviously would be into that type of game. Don't get me wrong, I know Airship have done a handful of sponsor streams and whatnot, but to be totally honest, nothing really seemed to really grab anything beyond in the moment of viewership. Would like to see like more community outreach stuff, more stuff for like partners and content creators and promotions. But honestly, at that point, and especially how much the game was just being dragged to the finish line with everything that was happening from the financial point of view, obviously Airship from a company probably deep down know that the net game is the game they need to be focusing on, and Wayfinder is kind of just what it is, which is a good game, but a good game that have a very small reach, since they are obviously lacking a lot of the backing and ability to properly promote the game out there, which, you know, it kind of is what it is on that, because hopefully whatever the net game will be a lot better when it comes to actually getting the eyes and ears on it without adding many issues. Finger crossed anyway. Either way, back to the video.
But it's one that certainly deserves a second look. Wayfinder was initially intended to be a free-to-play MMO light, similar in some aspects to Warframe. While Wayfinder 1.0 still retains that similar dungeon crawler loop, it presents as more of a traditional ARPG/looter with optional co-op, akin to Borderlands or Diablo. And this is really
I would say
smoothed
closer to
over the
Diablo,
problems caused by
personally.
that previous live service model. The game no longer requires an online connection to play, which means no more login issues, no annoying disconnects, and more notably, no lag. There's also been work done to make movement and combat snappier, like ability queuing, being able to animation cancel, redirect attacks mid-swing, and have more in-air control after a jump. Wayfinder's combat was already fundamentally solid with its diverse character and weapon abilities, the way that you would string together
really
combos,
like the combat.
dodging parries, and active reloads on the
MMO.
guns. But all these changes make the combat more responsive than ever, perhaps more so than it could have ever been as an online-only game. Similarly, now that Airship has little interest in needlessly prolonging playtime, characters and weapons are no longer unlocked through long material grinds.
Yeah, it's been
Instead,
streamlined.
characters are now easily unlocked through simple feats like...
By the way, if you haven't already, check out my playlist above. I did a breakdown of unlocking every single character on Wayfinder. But yeah, like now we went from having, you know, hundreds of items tied to unlocking weapon characters now to just like a handful. Like, don't get me wrong, like originally you could unlock weapon character in like 6 to 10 hours. Once again, if you knew what you're doing, or you know what you were doing, I should say. And now you can get that done in an hour, if that. And that is just for you enhancing your character plus upgrading like your weapons and stuff past the starting point where they start from. So that's something else to keep in mind. And a lot of the upgrade you can get passively if you are just interested in doing the main story stuff. So yeah, the grind is there, but it's so drastically changed. You can pretty much upgrade everything, every character, unlock all the stuff pretty quickly overall. So obviously that's gonna bring down the playtime drastically. And in some ways also better for players who did play it during the MMO days. That way you can get your character back up to snuff very, very fast, especially if you did play one of the characters that was from the MMO days. So yeah, that is something that is very good. A lot of the busy work is gone. I still have some issue with the way item drops operate now, but nonetheless, the whole unlocking is so much more quicker than it ever have been.
Beating a specific boss, and weapons are either bought from vendors or handed out like candy from chests.
Yeah,
that results in way more gameplay variety than the previous model could have ever offered.
Yeah, you constantly get weapons
far
now.
less monotonous. In 1.0, I've been able to play with basically every character and every weapon type in the time it would have previously taken to unlock a single character or weapon. The material grind to fully upgrade each of these things is still there for those who want to perfect their build, but now it's a lot more front-loaded and you get the chance to actually experiment with them before making that commitment. Perhaps more exciting, at least to me anyway, is the impressive amount of cosmetic stuff that you're now able to unlock by just playing the game.
Really great.
After completely ripping out the cash shop, Airship have
everything
converted
got
every cosmetic
now
that would have existed in there into actual loot drops. So there are now tons of armor pieces that you can collect.
Yeah, and every character have like 10 or so, maybe a little bit more than that. I've almost set that pretty much very similar to the way you would see laid out as in like Monster Hunter. The only difference is of course the items are not craftable, they are droppable. So yeah, not only are you constantly getting weapons, you're constantly getting armors. And since the armors and stuff have actual stats on them, at least for me, I am way more into actually trying to unlock all this stuff than it would be if it was just cosmetics. So yeah, that is a fantastic change. And also with how much stuff you can get now, doesn't fit the original problem that I know in the case of PSO. A lot of PSO players had a problem with not being able to customize your character as much. All that is gone now. Now you have a fairly large amount of customization. Obviously nowhere near PSO, but still drastically bigger than it ever have been. And you can honestly get a lot of really cool characters now with not only visual, but once again from stats, synergies, and just, yeah, the armor stuff adds so much more to the game now.
Each character that you can freely mix, match, and dye, extra weapon skins, mounts, and furniture for your apartment. There is now a real sense of visual progression here that was completely absent when this was a free-to-play MMO light. And I cannot overstate just how much that strengthens the gameplay loop for someone like me, who's all about the fashion game.
And for me, not being a fashion person, I do absolutely care about the stats, though.
Not just visual progression that's been improved either, as Airship have also made improvements to Buildcraft over the last year. It's still not perfect, but it's noticeably better than before. One major gripe I had with the early access launch was that you just didn't know what any of these stats actually do. Well, thankfully, that information is now clearly communicated in-game by just hovering over them in the character sheet, which makes it far easier to gauge how everything is contributing to your build. Another grievance I had was that characters felt constrained to specific weapon types. Like there was almost no reason to use a gun on a melee character. Well, that's also been addressed. Any interactions that were specific to melee or ranged attacks are now universal, and this has allowed me to make almost every weapon type work, no matter who I'm playing as. Now,
a little thing to add to that is it still have a little bit of, obviously you want to have your character be whatever weapon type they are tied to, because some of the abilities, especially once you're doing with melee to range, where you mainly notice it, since, you know, a lot of melee weapon or abilities are very much caught up into combat, and guns is more so for hanging back. So you will see a little bit of an issue there. But when you're going from like dagger to sword to scythe, like the more melee stuff, not so much of an issue, but yeah, just know it is a little so-so when it comes from melee to gun, depending on what class you're playing. But overall, like, yeah, pretty much with any class being able to use any weapon is way better balance than it ever was before.
It's still a pretty fundamentally shallow progression model. Outside a few little passive bonuses to play around, almost all of these systems are just in service of...
Yeah, there's the legit, like, bare minimum stat upgrade. Like, it helped, but yeah, there's just like more of an overall progression than actually feeling like you're becoming stronger.
Boosting your raw stats, lacking a lot of those gameplay defining interactions or synergies that the best ARPGs offer. But I do think the simplicity of it makes for a very accessible buildcraft model, and you still do feel that power climb in the same way you would in Borderlands or Diablo, and it's always very satisfying to see all that work pay off. So those are the more systemic changes to Wayfinder since its launch, but there's also of course been a bunch of new content added in 1.0 and the updates prior. Since launch there have been 2 new characters added to the game, Grendel, who's a bruiser with a focus on aggression and damage mitigation, and Laura, a sort of caster/tank hybrid that charges a meter for empowered magical attacks. The endgame has been expanded a lot too. They've almost doubled the number of bosses in the game, alongside high-level mythic versions for you to push the limits of your build. You've got to beat them with different combinations of mutators to maximize rewards, and you can do this infinitely with no lockouts, resulting in a rather pleasant and addictive loop, knocking them over faster and faster.
And I feel like, honestly, overall, like this right here, well, I feel like the co-op dot shining. Like, don't get me wrong, I find going through dungeons in co-op, but let's be honest, the dungeon stuff is, at the end of the day, nothing super insane to write home about. Like, don't get me wrong, it's great because, you know, to operate like dot hack, but overall, when it comes to co-op stuff, especially with how mechanically driven a lot of the bosses are, it's so much more satisfying to play that in co-op compared to doing dungeons. And obviously, this right here, it will the co-op fully shines in 1.0 anyway.
Affect your build. Likewise, there's now a new in-game setting to scale enemies and rewards up to your level, which makes dungeons now at least somewhat worth your time at max level. But of course, the new 1.0 dungeons provide the highest gear. And quick note on those dungeons, the randomized tile sets, side objectives, and mutator system that can be combined to chaotic effects are still in play here, which is great. I really enjoyed this from the early access. Sure, you'll come to recognize the same familiar spaces after a while, but there's
that was like one of the things originally that sold me on Wayfinder, is because that is literally the mechanic from the original Dot Hat trilogy, and if you play that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that one of them things I've been wanting to see in games more, and obviously that one of the mechanics that haven't really been adopted by any other game really, so just having that back, and now in like Wayfinder, that is one of the main key moments I realized in my love for Wayfinder, was like that type of stuff, because that mutating the dungeon and controlling the dungeon in the way you do through mutators are like honestly some of the best like replayability loop for me, and nothing have ever got my dopamine going as much as it did in Dot Hack. So having it here, fantastic.
Enough here to diversify each dungeon run, such that the repetition hasn't felt grating, even after tens of hours of running them. Outside of bosses and dungeons, Wayfinder also has an open world component. The early access only had like 1.5 explorable zones, but there are now 3 in total, each with great little side quests and secrets.
And man, like I praise this a lot in like this area, Fort March, is like insane how jump in quality it is. To the point that it still like now, you know, dozens upon dozen hour after 1.0, it's still like points in this area I'm still finding that I never seen before. And it like so insane of how much like little things are just scattered about everywhere. So Fort Mart is a very good example of the progression into 1.0 here. I thought like how much grander the game had become.
In my previous review, and it's worth pointing out again, Wayfinder's art direction is ridiculously stunning.
It is.
I know I'm definitely biased towards this stylized look, but I don't think anyone can look at these environments and not share that appreciation.
Yeah.
I mean, the color work, the detail, the atmospheric lighting.
But like, don't get me wrong, Highlands is one of the area that I like so. And same thing for Skyline. But yeah, once you get into like the areas, like the now 1.0 areas, is like, you could tell so much work I went into like the shading, the lighting, just the design in general. And the reason why a lot of us really want like a photo mode in Wayfinder, not only just for YouTube thumbnails, but because so much of it, like the visual style, like just like looking at like this scene as an example, like all this is like actual like 3D geometry, and so much of it does just look like painted art. And this is something that I have to give like big prop to the art team over at Airship of being able to do this.
It all looks fantastic, and the latest zone added with 1.0 is especially gorgeous. I will flag that performance continues to be an issue though. It's gotten better, but there's still semi-regular stuttering. FPS can drop as low as 50% in the open world.
Yeah, that is something that also issue. And then also don't forget the other issue here with the frame rate is they have, the leap from 1.0, or I should say from 1.0 going back to live service, is the enemy count have also went up in a lot of places, which also kind of hurt performance just a tiny bit.
World or during heavy action, and I still get crashes every now and then, so that's worth keeping in mind. The other,
yeah, just a heads up on that. There is on PC, there is still what they did with crashes there. On console, I haven't had any issue, but on PC, take it with a grain of salt, it might have got patched by that point, but I know at the launch of 1.0, it did have issue of black screens or not being able to launch appropriately and having like restarted a few times to get the game going. Them issue did not exist on console. I haven't had them issues, but the handful of times I have played it on PC, I have run into them. So just a heads up on that.
The thing the 1.0 launch was unfortunately unable to fix is the story. Likely one of the holdovers from Wayfinder's MMO Lite Origins, where the story is more concerned with getting you to unlock all the dungeons and bosses and whatnot, and less so with telling a compelling narrative.
Yeah.
It's not awful. I mean, there are some okay
bad
twists and decent voice performance.
Yeah, because the thing was about this is like this, the story, and also what you're going to see in some of like the mid-game content, especially in while you're still running around in the 4th chapter, you will see quests and stuff that you can tell is designed to just be content that is meant to drag out in a MMO. For example of this is by doing the same dungeon over and over again with different mutators and doing them in certain order, or getting a quest to go into a dungeon to find an item, just to then still be in the same dungeon, but still having like back out, complete the dungeon in a way with a mutator to then turn into quest. It's still a lot of that in this, which once again is a holdover from the MMO days. Yeah, it, like the other bad way I would put the story, to be honest, is the one thing I have noted about 1.0 is there in parts, well, obviously there is more story that been put into throughout the whole any of the 4th second area that does have moments of like, this is really good, and then you can tell when the switch happens to the widening of the live server, just because of like how much it very much put it here. Of like very much unlocked up. So yeah, you would notice like inconsistencies there, where you would notice when like, oh, this is obviously from the MMO because of that type of widening.
Performances, but these oddly lit characters, canned mocap animations, and unbefitting dialogue cards, it all still feels like it's stuck in early access, which stands in stark contrast against the premium look of the rest of the game. The conclusion to the story also feels obviously rushed. I totally get why that is, though. You can tell there were grander plans in store for this narrative, but with Airship Syndicate's...
Yeah, with the whole money issue, the funding issue, the like... Once again, maybe one day we can get a sequel that will sort this out, but yeah, I do agree with that statement of like, you can very much tell that, well, like, we need to get it done, we need to get this out, and then we need to move on, 100%.
Stretched thin as they are, it's clear they needed to wrap this up in any way they could, given the uncertainty of Wayfinder's future.
Yeah, no guarantee Airship going to be here in a year from now as well.
More than enough for 10 lifetimes.
Underwhelming story aside, for a mere $25 US,
Hit
I've
a
gotten
deal.
over 90 hours of playtime out of this thing, and still have more that I
I'm
want to
over
do.
500.
It's
I
just
still
got
haven't
this
done
Moorish
anything or
quality about it,
everything.
with its tight gameplay, the randomized dungeons, the power progression, the gorgeous visuals, and the cozy vibe. Look, sometimes you're just in the mood for a game where you can pop on a podcast or chill on a Discord call with friends while smacking some bad guys and working towards some long-term goal. It reminds me a lot of Remnant 2, actually. I was in a call the other day with a friend, and we were comparing the two games and noticed their similarities, and it's then that I realized why these kinds of games are really clicking with me at the moment. Remnant 2 has that live servicey endgame loop that I like, but it isn't a live service game, so balance and monetization aren't things that need to be accounted for in their design. The endgame is just to have fun, work your way up to basically breaking the game with some outrageous
give
build,
you a count on
and then
deck
do it
and
again
let
with
you
another
go.
build or move on to your next adventure. People only have time for like 1 or 2 live service games these days, so where many studios are trying and failing to get a slice of that live service pie, games with that familiar chase but a more finite endpoint, like Remnant 2, I think will only continue to become more attractive.
Yeah.
Albeit a more simplified offering, a Wayfinder now falls...
Yeah, because they pretty much like that type of design, keep all the stuff that you would have from like an MMO progression system or from a progression system that makes sense like long term. Once again, Wayfinder, Remnant, you see this in like Pat Exile, the whole like having that carrot to carry you through. And also having it where you can come in and out on the fly like you can with these types of games. Like, yeah, the design is way more appealing, and I would say, especially with how games are designed right now, with like the live service stuff, if you do enjoy that type of gameplay, but you don't have the time, the money, the finance it to keep up with that type of deal, it like, as I have said with Dot Hack, the original trilogy, being a single player placeholder for everyone that wanted to play MMOs but couldn't at the time, me included here. Well, games like Wayfinder and Remnant 2 as well, as stated out, is like that is the Dot Hat to the live services. You know, where you get all the same feeling and carrot on stick and dopamine without the crazy requirements that is needed to, you know, play live service games. So,
into that
good
same
example
bucket
on
with
that.
the 1.0 launch. So if you're looking
Go
for
up with
another
absolutely right on
ARPG
that.
free of those live service drawbacks, I suspect you'll have a good time with this in much the same way I have. Airship Syndicate have been put through the ringer, to say the least. Catastrophic launch
kidding,
issues,
man.
the publisher splitting their partnership, studio layoffs, the director...
Like, let's be honest, Airship is probably at that point the most unluckiest company and publisher that is somehow still afloat. And I gotta give them all the credit ever on that, of being able to pull themselves up with every horrible thing that happened without giving up. Any if Airship ends up having to close down a few months or a year or two from now because of all this, it's still insane how much they have accomplished under just so much out of their own control they have on them now and previously and probably in the future. So Airship absolutely deserve all the credit known to man, because any other company would have collapsed under all that bad luck. Because once again, it had nothing to do with them at the end of the day. It got everything to do with them surrounding and what happened. And it's just like, Godspeed to everybody at Airship.
Putting their own dollar down to keep this train going. Many other studios would have hedged their bets, squeezed their players' wallets as much as they could before leaving them in the dust.
Yeah.
But Airship Syndicate didn't. Given the game has basically no microtransactions aside from this little supporter pack you can buy, and has such a low base
With the
price
20
point
bucks
at $25, I cannot imagine Airship Syndicate are making big bucks from this.
They
so
not,
the fact that this
no.
studio still, against all odds, did
The
everything
game
they
never
could
gonna
to push
break
this over the
even.
finish.
This is one of them things, well, not only could you tell it from watching on like dev streams and live streams, this was a passion project for so many people at Airship, to the point that like, yeah, there was no way they ever gonna make the money back on that product at all. This is 100% a love project, that, you know, sadly kind of come to an end, obviously long before they wanted it to, but at the end of the day, you know, they did get it out there. They did technically finish it up outside of some, you know, updates coming in the future, and that F-Bot version coming hopefully before the end of the year. So it's still one of them cases that is a miracle, and a bleeding example of love and passion and resolve and what you can get in the end, any if it's not 100% to your liking. So like, once again, give them all the credit known to man on that.
Finish line to get this into a state that they are proud of and that their players deserve. That really speaks to their passion as game developers and their unwavering confidence in the work that they've created
hardly ever anymore.
Is that confidence misplaced? Maybe. Despite this genre shift, the quality of life updates, and all the new content added with the 1.0 launch, it's only spiked to about 3,000 concurrent players on Steam, though it's also on PlayStation with crossplay, so maybe those numbers are a bit higher, especially...
I think probably realistically the numbers are probably sitting at about 4,000, maybe 5,000 tops. And then when F-Bot comes, I think it probably like will once again probably hit maybe another 1,000 to 2,000. So like, I don't see Wayfinder at its peak in 1.0 probably getting any higher than like maybe 8,000. And like I said, that is just like it peaks to like $25 times, you know, whatever on that end. It's like, you know, they probably gonna come out at the end of the day with this game being like maybe a little over what, $500,000 if that, and that means you're pulling a number out my ass. So like, yeah, obviously, any with PlayStation and stuff, like the numbers are not super high by any means.
With how well suited this game is for console. Regardless, those are pretty low numbers, but honestly, that's okay. This isn't a live service anymore. It's not reliant on a player base to survive. It's just an honest-to-goodness, mostly uncompromised video game that can now exist in perpetuality for anyone to experience, which is more...
Also, don't forget, for anyone who don't know or have forgot, the game is pill-to-pill, so there are no server if you do co-op. So that also something that playing in it favor.
All that I can say for the many other live service titles I've had to wave goodbye to. I sincerely hope that Airship Syndicate gets the success and recognition they deserve.
Oh, absolutely.
That Wayfinder is someday regarded with the same admiration we have for games like No Man's Sky.
I don't think it will.
It's increasingly rare that we see comebacks like this, but the broader industry should be taking note of these stories. Because if teams as small as these can pull this off, there is no excuse for the massive AAA behemoths to not at least try to do the same. Airship Syndicate have really earned my respect for this remarkable turnaround.
Man.
Whether it's the next update, a spiritual successor, or another project entirely, I will be there day one.
I have always loved Airship, but like, yeah, everything about Wayfinder and everything about the situation is just like, yeah, at that point, like you gotta appreciate them and want to support the devs on whatever they might do next. Any of it ends up being something that I don't like or stand, or any game type that I'm not a fan of, I'm still absolutely going to support them in the end, just because of the resolve they have shown during all of this. And I really wish we had more devs, as well as more devs was able to do what Airship have been able to do any at the worstest of time. So like, absolutely, Airship 100% will, you know, have my money. So I highly recommend, you know, that is something that maybe you need to look into as well, because, you know, we need more devs like Airship out there
for whatever they make next. For now, I'm delighted to say that I can finally recommend Wayfinder.
Yep. Same, absolutely. Like, I recommend it at 1.0 with a lot of caveats. But like now, like nowadays, like where the game is now, anywhere shortcoming, absolutely 100% would recommend Airship and Wayfinder. So overall, yeah, I think the video was really good from Gear Up. I'll have that link in the description. So be sure to go get Gear Up a subscribe if you haven't already. Because, yeah, his videos and reviews are great. I 100% agree. Like I said, I got my own caveat to throw in there, but once again, it was a 15-minute video with my video of what, almost an hour at that point before I chop it down. So yeah, hopefully between my 2 cents and Gear Up 2 cents, hopefully if you haven't already, give Airship a try, or sorry, Wayfinder a try. Be sure to do that. Before you go do that, make sure to do the thumbs up, subscribe, hit all the bells up below for any more content coming here. Trying to get back on the daily schedule here. Halloween officially over on our live stream. So we no longer streaming 24/7 constantly over there. But I'm still streaming. So come on over twitch.tv/Maconn. I am streaming over there, as well as here on YouTube, my Let's Play channel here on YouTube, and of course over at Kick, because why not? All the link to all that is down in the description, so be sure to come say hi. And with that, that's going to go ahead and do it for me. And like always, I will go ahead and see you in the comments.